Just what are your plans for the off season and possibly playing or just doing individual workouts?
Yeah, I mean, probably take a little bit of a break here, just for maybe a week. I don't really want to lose a ton of the stuff I've worked on, and just trying to get my body back to full health. There's some USA.
What happens when the most influential star in an entire sport realizes she no longer has to ask for permission and decides it's time to take control? The entire basketball world is on edge because something massive is unfolding behind closed doors. And it has the potential to completely rewrite the power structure of women's sports as we know it. For an entire season, fans witnessed a once-in-a-generation talent navigate a storm of relentless pressure, suspect officiating, and openly hostile energy from established veterans who weren't ready to welcome a new era. She absorbed every cheap shot, carried herself with poise in front of the cameras, and handled every loaded press conference question with a calm that made it look like she was willing to endure anything for the league's growth. But away from the spotlight, a far more calculated and uncompromising plan has been taking shape, and it is far more aggressive than anyone expected. Now the league's current labor agreement is quietly counting down toward expiration, and the approaching 2026 season is starting to look less like a schedule and more like a deadline. Executives who believed they could guide and manage their new superstar asset are suddenly facing a reality they cannot control. The player who brought unprecedented attention, record-breaking ratings, and a flood of revenue into the sport is reportedly preparing to draw a firm line in the sand. Sources suggest that her inner circle has assembled a list of firm, non-negotiable demands that must be met before she even considers stepping onto the court when the new deal begins. This goes far beyond salary adjustments or cosmetic upgrades. It signals a full-scale transformation of a system that has remained outdated for years. And what comes next could permanently shift the balance of power across professional sports, forcing the old guard to either evolve or be left behind. The reality is, the financial foundation of the league is no longer just outdated, it is completely incompatible with the level of value now being generated, and the 2026 season represents the precise moment when everything can be torn down and rebuilt from the ground up. The Players Association has already exercised its right to opt out of the existing collective bargaining agreement, effectively wiping the slate clean and creating a rare window of leverage that almost never exists in professional sports. And at the center of that leverage stands a single superstar who has transformed regular season games into sold-out events, turned routine broadcasts into record-shattering television nights, and converted a historically niche market into a booming global product. Yet the base compensation attached to that level of influence remains shockingly low, a figure that barely scratches the surface of what she generates for the league on a nightly basis. While her personal brand has exploded into a multi-million-dollar endorsement empire with deals spanning global giants in apparel, beverages, and consumer goods, the league itself continues to profit heavily from her presence while distributing only a tiny fraction of that revenue back to the players who are actually responsible for creating it. That imbalance has quietly reached a breaking point. Behind the scenes, discussions are no longer centered around minor adjustments or symbolic raises. The conversation has escalated into a full-scale restructuring of how revenue is shared, how television money is distributed, and how star power is valued in a modern sports economy. The league's most recent media rights agreement, reportedly worth several $billion, has only intensified that conversation. Insiders understand that the sudden spike in valuation did not materialize in a vacuum. It was fueled by unprecedented ratings, viral highlights, and a surge of mainstream attention driven almost entirely by one player's arrival. That reality has forced a new expectation into the negotiating room. The demand being whispered behind closed doors is simple but revolutionary. A revenue-sharing model that mirrors the structure seen in the most profitable leagues in the world, where players receive an equal partnership in the income they generate. A clean 50-50 split that recognizes the athletes as true business partners rather than replaceable labor. The message attached to that demand is equally clear. The era of underpayment disguised as opportunity is over. Either the league evolves into a modern enterprise that properly compensates its stars, or it risks watching its most valuable asset step away entirely and take the audience with her, but money is only one layer of the growing tension. The physical environment on the court has become an equally explosive issue. Throughout the previous season, there was a visible pattern of hyper-aggressive play directed toward the league's most marketable face, a level of contact that consistently crossed the line between competitive intensity and targeted hostility. Fans watched as repeated collisions, blindside screens, and off-ball hits went either unpunished or lightly addressed by officials who appeared reluctant to take a firm stance. Analysts, former players, and commentators openly questioned whether the league was doing enough to protect its own investment. The silence from leadership only amplified those concerns. Now, sources close to the situation indicate that officiating reform has become a central demand for the next era of the league. The expectation is not preferential treatment but consistent enforcement. Clear penalties for dangerous contact. Automatic reviews for malicious fouls. Financial consequences for repeat offenders. And a cultural reset that places player safety above unwritten codes and locker room politics. The concern extends beyond the hardwood as well. The infrastructure surrounding the league's day-to-day operations was pushed to its limit by the sudden explosion in popularity. Viral footage of chaotic airport scenes, unregulated fan interactions, and overwhelmed security personnel exposed serious vulnerabilities in how the league handles travel and player protection. What once functioned as a modest operation is now dealing with superstar-level attention, and the gap between those two realities has become impossible to ignore. Internal conversations now revolve around a complete overhaul of travel logistics. Full-time charter flights. Dedicated security teams. Controlled access points at every arena. And a professional standard that matches the expectations of a global entertainment property. The underlying argument is straightforward. If the league is going to market its stars as global icons, it must also protect them like global icons, and all of these demands are being made from a position of unprecedented leverage. Because for the first time in the league's history, its biggest draw does not actually need the league in order to remain relevant or financially successful. Alternative opportunities are rapidly emerging, offering new formats, shorter seasons, and significantly higher pay. International clubs continue to present lucrative offers that dwarf domestic salaries. Independent exhibition tours are drawing massive crowds on their own. The ecosystem of professional basketball has expanded, and with it has come a new level of freedom for elite talent. That freedom has fundamentally shifted the balance of power in negotiations. The question is no longer whether the league can afford to meet these demands. The real question is whether it can afford not to. That shifting balance of power is precisely what has created such a volatile atmosphere behind the scenes, because while the league's future may depend on embracing this new reality, not everyone within the system is willing to accept it without a fight. For years, veteran players carried the weight of the league through seasons that received minimal coverage, modest attendance, and limited financial reward. They built the foundation during a time when national attention was scarce and corporate investment was uncertain. Now they are being asked to adjust to a new structure that appears to revolve around one transcendent figure, and that transition has sparked a deep sense of frustration within certain corners of the locker room. Interviews have grown more pointed. Public comments have become more guarded. And union meetings have reportedly turned into tense debates about priorities, pace of change, and the distribution of future earnings. At the heart of that internal divide is a philosophical disagreement about what progress should look like. One side believes the next agreement should lift all players gradually, raising minimum salaries and improving overall conditions in a steady, collective manner. The other side, driven by the unprecedented economic impact of its biggest star, is pushing for immediate structural reform that dramatically increases top-end salaries and ties compensation directly to revenue generation. Both perspectives carry weight. Both reflect legitimate experiences. But reconciling them within a single agreement has proven incredibly difficult. League executives now find themselves trapped between two powerful forces. On one side, a new era driven by star power, media value, and global demand. On the other, an established culture rooted in equality, shared sacrifice, and long-term sustainability. That tension has been further intensified by recent changes at the team level, where organizational decisions are increasingly reflecting the influence of superstar players. Coaching changes, front office adjustments, and roster moves are now being interpreted through the lens of star preference and marketability. What once felt like a traditional hierarchy has started to shift toward a player-driven model, where elite talent has a direct voice in shaping the environment around them. For some observers, this represents a natural evolution toward modern sports business. For others, it feels like a loss of control and a break from the league's original identity. The result is an atmosphere where every decision carries symbolic weight, and every negotiation feels like a referendum on the league's future direction. Meanwhile, the broader sports industry is watching closely, because the outcome of these negotiations could set a precedent that extends far beyond a single league. If a player successfully leverages individual popularity into structural change, it could redefine how emerging leagues approach media deals, revenue sharing, and player rights moving forward. Investors, sponsors, and broadcasters are all factoring that possibility into their long-term strategies. They understand that star-driven economics is no longer limited to men's sports, and the numbers now support that shift in a very real way. The stakes, therefore, extend well beyond one contract cycle. They touch on the very blueprint of how modern professional sports organizations are built and operated, and as the calendar moves closer to the expiration of the current agreement, the urgency continues to build. Every rumor, every report, and every public statement adds another layer of pressure to an already delicate situation. If a compromise is reached, it could usher in a new golden era defined by financial growth, global reach, and elevated standards across the board. But if negotiations break down, the consequences could be immediate and severe. A shortened season. A potential lockout. Or the unthinkable scenario where the league's brightest star chooses to explore opportunities elsewhere, leaving behind a product that suddenly looks very different without its central attraction. The league now stands at a crossroads unlike anything it has faced before. One path leads toward rapid evolution, where business realities and player power reshape the structure into something bigger and more profitable than ever imagined. The other path clings to tradition, prioritizing gradual change and internal harmony at the risk of losing momentum in a highly competitive entertainment landscape. The decision will not be easy, and the margin for error is almost non-existent. Because in an era defined by attention, influence, and economic impact, the individuals who control those elements ultimately control the future, and right now, all of those elements are concentrated in the hands of one player who fully understands her value, her leverage, and her ability to change the game far beyond the boundaries of the court. The coming months will determine whether the league chooses to build around that reality or resist it. Either way, the outcome will reshape the sport for years to come. Just weeks after she carried her franchise back into the postseason and rewrote the record books in the process, the organization made a stunning decision that sent shockwaves across the entire league, abruptly parting ways with the head coach who had just overseen that historic run. To anyone paying attention, it was obvious the move had little to do with play calls or sideline strategy. It signaled a decisive shift in power, a move to align the future of the team with the vision of its biggest star.